Thank you so much for staying with us this morning. You know, we have and continue to talk about the number of out-of-school children over and over again at every opportunity we get. You know, but one of the consequences of that is what we found on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning, which left all of us here, Maokwe in particular, with her mouth agape, reading the fact on the front page of the Guardian newspaper that 70 to 80% of victims of domestic and sexual violence are under 15 years. Under 15 years old. What are the consequences of this? What are the causes of this? What are the things that we can do to ensure that this doesn't happen? What happens in the immediate future and in the far future? That's the reason we have this morning Praise Fowowe, who is a family life professional. He joins us from Dallas, Texas in the U.S. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Fowowe.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Ayo. Good to be here with you.
Thank you. I don't know how that story caught you, if you have been able to look at it. The fact that on the front page of that paper, 70 to 80% of sexual and domestic violence cases in Nigeria are children under 18 years old. In fact, I saw part of the story that says that the youngest of them is not even up to a year old.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that should be a surprise to me because, I used to function in that space many years ago, and I went around the country. I must have worked in like 13 states, and listening to young people. Met a lot of 7-year-olds who were sexually active way back. Met 9-year-olds who were not just sexually active, who were addicted to sex, and quite a number of them were victims of child sexual abuse, and we did quite a lot way back, even though it looks like the law seems better, looks like the Child Rights Act has been, passed into law in almost all the states right now. But it's not just about being passed into law, it's the will to enforce what the policies say. So I'm not totally surprised at the headline that you just read this morning, because it seems to me that our culture, and a culture in quotes, in certain parts of the country, because if you trace the history of the Child Rights Act, you will know that initially when it was introduced, I think in 2002, before it was passed in 2003, there were sections of the country that stood against it because, again, they came from the side of religion, and before you knew it, it became political. But they were able to pass it. But even after then, before many of them could accent and sign it into law, it was like a tug of war. So when we have a society where we don't prioritize the best interest of the child, you will see all sorts. So I'm not totally surprised. Despite these laws, you can still see a whole lot of children who are serving as underage house helps across the country. So not totally surprised at the news at all.
And what also makes that sad is that a sizable number, just look at the screen right now, a sizable number of children are out of school. Look at the figures that we're seeing right there. Could this be part of the reason? Could this be this sexual and domestic violence we're talking about a blindside consequence of this situation of children out of school?
Yeah, it's just one of it, because a lot of the children are in school are also victims. The thing about us is that we have this culture of shame. So you have a whole lot of parents who don't even report. They don't even know what to do. I used to work in Nigerianpolitics at the time, working with a lot of young people, 480 of them, every week that I had access to for 7 years of my life. And not once did any of their parents show up to even check who was talking to them, to know whether I was a kidnapper, to know who I was. Sometimes they will even send the children when it's time for school fees. Oh, that's your teacher that was teaching you. Can he help with school fees and things like that? And I saw firsthand situations where, a child gets raped and then you report and police picks up the victim, then parents come to say to you, oh, can we settle out of court? Can they just help us find like 100,000 or 50,000, and then we will bury the case and things like that. So yes, out of school children, about 20 million, it's very sad in this age and time. And at the time, even when we say that all the states have now signed the Child Rights Act into law, right? And we have 20 million children out of school. That's a gross violation of this act that we say we have passed into law, because it means that the best interest of the child is not being protected. And if you look at the Child Rights Act, 4 principles underpin that. Number 1 is non-discrimination, which means that every child must have the right, regardless of their gender, their race, their tribe, to maximize their potential at the highest level. I mean, look at some states. You see children sit on bare floors, sit on tires. Even in some of the states, we can say have even done well. I mean, I remember that I contributed money to provide desks and chairs for a particular school in Ojodu in Lagos. And that's Lagos, right? Not to talk of other states. And Lagos seems to be the state that has done, a whole lot of work when it comes to this issue. Number 2 of that is the best interest of the child, and we talk about the best interest of the child. If we're a nation that prioritizes the best interest of the child, we will not have, 20 million children who are out of school, because the number 3 of the principle is the rights of the child to survival and development, and that even talks about children who have some form of disabilities. Look at the way our schools are constructed. We don't have ramps, so the capacity of those children to maximize the potential at the highest level is already hampered with the construction, system in many of our schools in many states of the federation, and the last one is the voice of the child, which says that you can't plan a program for the child without even hearing the child. How many, when adults in our country don't even have access to government officials, is he a child? We do a whole lot of International Children's Day. There are events, as far as I'm concerned. I used to cry about these things and say, let's stop doing events. Can we create intervention that we can measure? We're not interested in things that we can measure. We're just interested in events and photo ops, and we say, oh, this first lady has done this, that first lady has done that. And then the cycle continues, a new government is in power, and then the same thing happens over and over again. Do we even sit down to ask, who is a Nigerian child? What plan do we have for the Nigerian child? If anything goes wrong with Nigerian, I live in Texas. Every time I hear, my phone beeps because a child has been kidnapped or someone, they can literally describe the kidnapper. They will track the person down, and you see it. So that's how you know when a people prioritize the best interest of the child. With 20 million children out of school is more than some African countries. In fact, many African countries. So when you have 20 million children out of school, we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder, and those children can be deployed to do anything and everything. And if you pay attention to what is happening on social media with the Generation Alpha and the Generation Z, you could literally see that things are falling apart with the content I even see. And the center is no longer holding, even from the parental side of things.
Listening to you right now, the consequence of these 20 million children out of school is so vast. As you said, a good number of people have also expressed that kind of concern, including former President Obasanjo. But looking at, the issues you raised around, Child Rights Act, line up for me, if you can, the relationship between the Child Rights Act and then these Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act that a number of states have, which was passed in 2015, that a number of states have also adopted. And then Lagos State and as well as Ekiti State have protection against domestic violence law and the sexual and gender-based violence laws. How do these laws, this Violence Against Persons Act and sexual and gender-based, how do they align with the Child Rights Act?
Well, you see, our problem has not even been in enacting laws. Our problem has been in implementing. I read a lot of policies just yesterday, and I'm shocked at the content of the policies. And I'm saying, if a nation has got all this in place, you have these laws, you have this act in place, then you shouldn't be having this problem. For example, you have a child who is being well fed, right, with the right balanced diet, But then consistently, you realize that there's kwashoko, right? You have a right to now question, are we sure this child is being fed? Are we sure the child is being fed with the right things? Because, I mean, this thing is garbage in, garbage out. If you do this, then you will have this consequence. But when you have the consequence and you claim you are doing this, then most likely you just have them on paper. And you know that we have committees upon committees. I can tell you for free, there is no state in Nigeria, for example, that can say that I've not written a paper to, I've not written proposals to, I've not raised a whole lot of noise about what else needs to be done when it comes to, because you can have this thing as laws, but who are the people to implement it? Are they even aware? I interact with some of the security agents. I interact with, some of the professionals in various ministries who are supposed to be implementing some of these things. And I'm shocked that they are clueless about even the position of the law about this thing. So it's not for lack of laws and acts. Because if you have, these two laws that you cited right now together, there is no way you should have 20 million children out of school if there is enforcement. But you have situations where our culture clashes with, so for example, let's take the age of the child. What is the age of a child in Nigeria? The Child Rights Act talks about, age 18, right? But you know that there are states who don't believe that, hide under religion to say, so you still have child marriage in some states of the federation, depending on who is consummating that kind of marriage, right? If it's the poor in those states, people will make a lot of noise and maybe there will be consequence. But if it's the rich, right, everybody keeps quiet.
Okay, so, well, Mr. Fowowe, just one quick thing. In all of things that you are unpacking there, believe me, it's chagrin, but maybe as parents, you and I, we may not understand it the way women will do. So my colleague Malkwe has a question for you.
Yes.
And the passion with which you speak about children still comes through. I know a lot of things are wrong. Really, when we look at the statistics and when we look at even the front page of The Guardian this morning, which I already brought to your notice, but I want to know, as somebody who has advocated for children over the years and, advocated in particular for the Nigerian child, what are some of the low-hanging fruits that you think that we can implement that will immediately have great impact? Something that it's a no-brainer. Things that we can immediately do to show that we actually are showing some commitment to the Nigerian child.
Thank you very much, Malkwe. I think the first thing is the basic thing we can even do. Can we even provide adequate infrastructures in our schools? Right, to start with. Can we even normalize the fact that no child should be out of school? I mean, that's within the reach of any government. I mean, you can't, for example, Lagos is a center of excellence, but there are schools, Ogun State is close to Lagos State. There are schools where children sit on bare floor, right? And you see children even walk around the streets and nobody is asking, why are you not in school, right? And so it has to be a handshake between government and even parents, right? So if you have a situation where, let's say child sexuality education, for example, that should be taught at home, right? I personally, I used to live in an estate in Nigeria. The first time I moved to that estate, I took responsibility. I begged all the parents, can you send your children to me? Because you say predators are everywhere right now. They've always been. But the shape of predators have changed a little bit. It's no longer just human beings. You now have nations. You now have systems. You now have sectors, right? And so you, on one hand, we say, oh, we don't want child sexual abuse in Nigeria. But you have musicians who sing content that you bring to children's events, right? And you know this content is not right for the child. And when you read, and I can tell you a classic case. There was a time I think Nickelodeon was coming to do an event in Nigeria, and there was a particular brand, that invited certain artists whose content was not in the best interest of the child, which was a gross violation of the Child Rights Act. I raised an alarm. We started trending it on social media, and I wrote to them to say, you know what, these people you have brought, right, are anti-children based on their lyrical content. And you know what they said to me? They said, Prince, if you can get 1,000 parents to write to us, we will drop them. And so we made a lot of noise. Parents, can you write to this particular corporate brand to say, hey, no. We couldn't get 1,000 parents. Right. So you see that on one hand, everybody makes mouth, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the action, everybody, hands off. So basic thing, parenting, we have that within our control. We can do a lot of parenting education. There are several centers, for example, in Texas where you can go learn how to parent a child. And once you are negligent, they can actually withdraw the child from you. So if we strengthen the practitioners, and I love what Lagos State has done. In fairness, Lagos State, I think Lola is in charge of domestic violence prevention team. They have done incredibly well because their response rate is quite high. As at the last time I checked, I work closely with them. But that cannot be said of other states. Do you know that every time I get a case and people asking me, oh, this thing happened in this particular state in Nigeria, the first thing I'm asking is, who can we call? Who can we reach? We don't even know who to reach, except for some NGOs and agencies. So basically, basic thing, education. Can we ensure that our schools are standardized? Can we ensure the security of the child in our schools? That is within the reach of any government at all. But you see, that I just mentioned, we're not even doing.
Well, I think one of the things that you also mentioned, which is very critical there, is parenting. And I'm trying to imagine a parent saying, look, I want to go to a parenting school. Well, maybe we'll have that conversation some other time. Prince Fowowe is a family life professional. Thank you so much for your time and for illumination this morning.